Mic's muted, so if they're red, just press the button to unmute.
Great. So with that, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order with a little dance of the merry creature in front of me. And I will ask Drew to go ahead and lead us in a roll call.
All right, good afternoon, SCTA, RCPA Board of Directors. We'll start with Director Janice Cater Thompson.
Here.
Director Chris Corsi. Here. Director Susan Harvey.
Here.
Director Gerard Giudice.
Here.
Director Nisa Hinton.
Here.
Director Ariel Kelly. We have absent. Director Sandra Lowe.
Here.
Director Jeff Okrepke. Here. Director David Rabbit had informed me he'd be absent today. Director Rosa Reynosa.
Here.
Vice Chair Melanie Bagby.
Present.
And Chair Linda Hopkins.
Present.
And we have a quorum.
Wonderful. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to public comment on items not on the regular agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Are there any members in person who wish to speak on this item? Just in case the footsteps coming down the hall. Nope.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Good to see you. And with that, Drew, anything received in advance?
I did not receive any pre-submitted comments on items not on the regular agenda, and I do not see any members on the public on Zoom right now wishing to speak.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So with that, we will come back to the consent calendar, which is items 4.1 through 4.9 today. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on the consent calendar? No. And the Vice Chair, let the record show that Director Kelly has joined us for the meeting. I think Drew got that. Perfect. So any comments from members of the public in person? Seeing none. Drew, anyone online?
I currently do not see any members with their hands up wishing to speak, Chair Hopkins.
Great. And with that, I would bring it back to the board for a motion on the consent calendar.
Move to approve consent calendar.
Thank you so much, Director Harvey. And thank you, Director Cater Thompson. With that, let's go ahead. Actually, we can, since we're all in person, simply do a voice vote. So all in favor say aye. Aye. Any abstentions or those opposed? Seeing none, that does carry unanimously. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to item 4.10, which is an action item. Oh, no, actually, never mind. That was actually also part of the consent calendar. So I apologize. Just making sure for the record that was for some reason broken out separately, that it was through 413. So I just want to comment that for the record that it was 4.1 through 413. So with that, it is 5.1, which will be going over to Tanya.
I have to turn the mic on first. So good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and directors. I'd like to introduce item 5.1, which is a two-part item. First, you will hear a presentation on Sonoma Clean Power's GeoZone initiative, and then we have included a resolution of support for you to consider for adoption. So first, I'd like to introduce Miles Horton from Sonoma Clean Power, who will be giving the presentation. And a brief bio for Miles. As Legislative Policy and Community Engagement Manager, Miles represents Sonoma Clean Power in the state capitol and leverages the organization's unique position on the cutting edge of the energy transition to help inform policy discussions around clean energy, infrastructure build-out, electric rates, and more. He also leads community engagement efforts for Sonoma Clean Power's GeoZone initiative, working to build support for local, reliable, clean energy. Prior to joining Sonoma Clean Power, Miles spent 7 years in the California legislature as an aide to State Senator Scott Wiener and Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, having previously worked as a legal assistant on the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. He's a graduate of Williams College, where he majored in political economy. So please join me in welcoming Miles.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And just taking a couple of moments to brag as well. I feel very lucky that I get to work with Miles as a member of the board of directors of Sonoma Clean Power. And I did have the opportunity to visit Sacramento with him. And I will say that he is bizarrely beloved in the state capitol. I don't think that we could go 100 yards without him being hugged, almost like side tackled by a former colleague. And so it's absolutely wonderful to work with him. And he is a great partner, to work with from the SCTA RCPA side. So Miles, kick it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate it. But bizarrely indeed, but it's nice to, feel like I have these great relationships, and thank you, Tanya, for the warm introduction. And thank you, directors, for the opportunity to be here today and present about our GeoZone effort. So, this is our premier effort to secure affordable, reliable, clean power for our region, which I'll get into. Let's see if this works. I apologize. I'm pressing the next button, but it doesn't seem to be going. So maybe I'll just tell you next slide if that's cool.
And if we get it into full screen, that might help as well.
Oh, thank you. I'm also like the least tech savvy person alive. So if I'm doing something wrong, just tell me.
I'm just grateful that we're not echoing today like we were in prior meetings. That was a great job, whoever fixed that problem.
Still not getting it.
It moved.
Oh, it is? Oh, nice. Oh, well, now I spoiled the surprise. Okay, great. I will just look up and then I will ignore this one. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Okay, great. Well, diving on in. So the Geothermal Opportunity Zone or GeoZone initiative is our effort to build 600 megawatts of new next generation geothermal energy here in our service territory in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And if we can get this done, it'll have a lot of big advantages for our region. We'll lock in long-term contracts for local, reliable, clean power so that our customers aren't as subject to the kind of whims and ups and downs of this global energy market. We'll create a large number of well-paid, highly skilled union jobs and generate local economic activity. And then, our mission as an agency is to help fight the climate crisis, right? Through the GeoZone, we'll help sort of incubate this next generation of emerging technologies that can be used to fight climate change worldwide. So we're really excited about it. This has the potential to be one of the biggest economic initiatives in the region's history. So let's dive on in. Just a quick refresher on Sonoma Clean Power. I think you all know this, but we are your community-owned electricity provider. We go out and procure the electricity. PG&E then, for most customers, PG&E then ships it to the customer over their wires. Our value proposition is threefold. Greener energy than what the incumbent PG&E can provide typically. Competitive rates. Right now, we're slightly cheaper than PG&E. And then local control over our energy supply and customer programs. And that's really what the GeoZone is all about, is taking that local control and reinvesting in our region. One thing, One thing we're really proud of at Sonoma Clean Power today is that, we're really leading the way on clean energy. We provide our customers a minimum of about 90% clean energy, which, is compared to about 55% clean energy that California gets as a whole. So we're really ahead of the curve in some ways. We're doing a lot. But, on the other hand, we're still not doing enough. We're relying on dirty natural gas plants like the one in this picture at times when there's no solar power, no wind, and batteries are depleted or empty. This is periods like, in the night or in the winter when there's a long, dark, windless week. And this has several negative effects. The first is obviously every time we burn natural gas for electricity, our clean power company is helping fuel the climate crisis and all the associated heat waves, wildfires, floods, and other, negative impacts. Most of the natural gas plants we and everyone else relies on are in the LA basin, which recently got an F grade for its air quality from the American Lung Association. These plants are typically located in communities that are, low income, disadvantaged, and already dealing with a variety of environmental health impacts. And then production of that natural gas often involves practices like fracking that we oppose that can cause, local environmental impacts at the source as well. So, our local community doesn't have to deal with many of these impacts. We deal with some of them, but they're happening so that we can keep the lights on here, and as well as every other power provider in California. And, the reliance on natural gas has a very direct impact here at home, which is the financial impact. So, these plants are very, very expensive to maintain. And as they age and just get sort of patched up over time, that cost only goes up. So actually, even as our share of clean energy in the portfolio has increased significantly over the last 10 years, our payments to these natural gas plants have gone up as well, even though they're a smaller and smaller proportion of our portfolio. So we're basically just paying a ton of money for them to stand by for when we need them. like I mentioned, we need these gas plants today to keep the lights on at times when there's, no sun, no wind, and batteries have been used up. Here's Windsor in the middle of the night or at dawn or something. That kind of illustrates that. What we found is that getting new clean energy online has become relatively straightforward. Excuse me. We have a lot of solar, wind, batteries. We're able to, secure those resources. But getting that clean reliability, clean technologies that can run around the clock, it is really challenging. And, compounding that as the demand for electricity grows. So as we see, new electric vehicles and all electric buildings and artificial intelligence, data centers, all of that come online, that challenge is only growing. So what we're kind of looking at here is, how do we solve all these challenges at once, right? How do we get to 100% clean energy while saving our customers money, keeping that money in the local community, and also, again, cutting ties to these toxic, fossil fuel plants? So the good news is, there's a lot of solutions, from energy efficiency to paying customers to save money or save energy at key times of the day to much more. And we're pursuing all of these. But the biggest component here is this GeoZone initiative, which we're here to talk about. So just very briefly, before we get into that, I think most of us know, but what is geothermal power? So this is a form of clean energy that uses heat under the Earth's surface to heat water to create electricity. And so with a conventional geothermal plant, similar to the one illustrated on the slide here, the idea is that you take water and you, actually, let me back up. You find a place where magma comes close to the Earth's surface and it's warming the solid rock above it to very high temperatures. And so Northern California, and especially this region, is one of those really special places where that's happening. And so that really hot solid rock, if you can find fractures in that rock that water can move through, what you can do is send water down, you pass it through the rock, its exposure to that extreme heat, boils the water essentially. And then at the back end, you have a pipe that draws it back up as steam. And that steam spins a turbine that generates electricity. And so that's that's similar to what's happening today up at, the geysers that Calpine operates, right? To make that work, you need three things. You need that hot rock close to the Earth's surface. You need fractures in that rock that water can move through. And then you need lots of water, right? Because a lot of that steam is lost as it comes back up. And then even if you send it back in, a lot of it dissipates out into that underground environment. What's exciting is these new technologies we're looking at, you really only need hot rock close to the surface. You don't need those natural fractures and you don't need lots of water. And so this will allow these technologies to be used in many, many more places around the world because that hot rock is pretty common. It's the other two that are really the limiting factors. California, California is really like the absolute premier place in the world for geothermal energy. We just have some of the hottest rock close to the surface. We have the workforce, we have the industry that's ready to tap into it. And we kicked off the geothermal revolution 50 years ago at the geysers. And so now I think it's our chance to do that all over again with these next generation technologies. So leading into the GeoZone initiative, again, our goal is to secure 600 megawatts of new next generation geothermal power here in our service territory over the years to come. If this was made possible by the emergence of new technologies in just the last few years, actually very recently. If successful, we'll have 100% clean energy around the clock in what we think is the most cost-effective way possible. And, just to share some exciting news on that front, the US Department of Energy just released a report that highlighted research that found that, with really aggressive deployment of these new technologies, the cost of eliminating carbon emissions in the Western grid could be 25% lower than it would be without these technologies. So it's really been this revolution just in the last couple of years. So we're really excited. This geothermal power, it's also very reliable because it's mostly underground. It's not as vulnerable to heat waves, wildfires. I mean, there obviously is some vulnerability, but it can keep operating even in extreme conditions. And, it basically provides all the attributes I was saying we get from natural gas, but without the relentless cost increases and without the climate impacts. So, you might ask, we're already home to the biggest geothermal resource in the world. Why aren't we using that? Well, we buy a lot of power from the geysers today, but that's pretty much bought up. So if we want more, we have to go out and create new resources ourselves. So we launched the GeoZone initiative to essentially roll out the welcome mat for developers to come build here in our territory. And our basic compact is, if the developer comes and builds next generation geothermal here, and they offer us first dibs on any price that they bring to the market once it's built, then we commit to buying the power or finding another off-taker, and we help them with some of the local stakeholder and community engagement, which is what we're doing right now. I think a big focus here is making sure that the benefits really, flow first and foremost to the local community. As policymakers, you've probably seen with offshore wind proposals up in Humboldt. I'm not saying this to be critical, but I think there's a big perception of, well, we're dealing with these impacts here in Humboldt so that people in LA can have electricity, right? And that's caused a lot of friction. I think the nice thing about us being publicly owned, locally operated, we can make sure that this is really about what the community needs and what local folks want to see with these projects. We are working with 3 companies to make this vision a reality. I'll just skim through, but they all use a different but really interesting technology. So the first is called Ever. It's a Canadian company that uses what's called an advanced closed loop system. And like I mentioned, with all these, we're the tip of the spear here. It's us and some projects in Utah and a few around the world that are really making this happen. So this is all very cutting edge stuff. So Ever's concept, advanced closed loop, basically involves, finding that field of solid hot rock, and then you drill a pipe to send the water down into that really hot area. And then you drill the pipe horizontally, and the water stays in the pipe the whole time. And then you bring it back up, and it just stays in that sort of circular loop the whole time. So you don't really, you shouldn't really lose too much water. And in that hottest part of the rock, the pipe can kind of radiate out to get more surface area to heat the water even more. And then it'll reconverge to be brought back up to the power plant. Chevron New Energies is the renewable energy division of Chevron. They use a concept that's somewhat similar to the advanced closed loop called enhanced geothermal systems, or EGS. And that is the one that's shown the most promise so far, just in the last few years. This basically involves, again, you sort of keep the water in a controlled system the whole time. So you send the water down in a steel lined pipe, and then instead of drilling that pipe horizontally, which is fairly difficult, you create artificial fractures in the rock for the water to move through in a sort of directional way, surrounded by solid rock, so it can't leak out. And so you create this kind of spider web of cracks. The water passes through that, again, gets exposed to those really hot temperatures. And then at the back end, there's a pipe to bring it back up. And we'll get more into that in a second. One exciting development on that front, the U.S. Department of Energy recently awarded Chevron a grant of about $15 to $20 million. They're finalizing the amount for their project here in Sonoma County. So that'll really help defray the cost to our customers. And then last but not least, Circ Energy, really cool concept. Their idea is to build energy storage to pair with an existing unit up at the geysers. And so during the day, we have ample solar power on the system. It's in the evening when everyone goes home and turns on their appliances and TVs and whatever, right as the sun's going down, that's when we need the power. And so their idea is fill a silo full of sand or some similar thermal medium, use excess solar power to heat that up all day to a really hot temperature. And then in the evening, take the steam from that existing geothermal unit, pass it through the silo, superheat it, and then that existing unit can increase its output significantly. So it's kind of storing that energy for the time of day that we need it. As with anything else, there's pros and cons to these technologies. I won't go through everything on the slide, but we do like that these pair really well with solar power. Solar is most productive in the summer, obviously when days are long and sunny. Next generation geothermal is most productive in the winter when you have a higher temperature differential between the cold air and the hot steam that sort of pulls it through the turbine with more force. It also uses significantly less land than solar and wind, which is increasingly sort of a hot topic as sensitive areas are gobbled up to create solar and wind farms. This is just it's just a large building on the surface. There's a very minimal land footprint. And then having local power can help protect us from some of these blackouts or supply chain disruptions. But there are some downsides. It needs a high initial investment to get up and running. That's why we're working aggressively to secure these federal grants and other grants through the State Energy Commission and elsewhere, so that our customers aren't eating too much of that cost before we're achieving some of those savings down the road. And then with enhanced geothermal specifically, this is the artificial fracturing, there is potential to cause earthquakes. It's not actually during the fracturing, but it's during the operation of the facility. If an existing fault is sort of lubricated, this risk exists today at the geysers. And so we're following, the latest scientific research here really closely to make sure that we're not creating any new additional risk for the community. And actually, sort of in that vein, the Department of Energy has a project called the Utah Forge Project. That's the most advanced enhanced geothermal project in the world, that has never caused an earthquake big enough to be, inconvenient, let alone dangerous. So we're continuing to, to follow that and their safety protocols there. Just a little more detail on how the technology works. As I mentioned, conventional geothermal power involves finding natural fractures or sort of geologic features that water can move through. Enhanced geothermal essentially, replicates that by artificially creating those fractures in what was solid rock. And so, this was made possible by learnings from the oil and gas fracking industry. So I just want to get a little into the differences there because we are keenly aware of the problems with that industry. But we're excited to use those learnings in a safer way to create clean energy. Enhanced geothermal systems, the water is encased in a steel-lined pipe as it's sent down and brought up. The generation of geothermal heat is happening thousands of feet below any groundwater basin. So it really shouldn't interact with groundwater at all, unlike fracking for oil and gas. And then, with fracking for oil and gas, you send the water down. It typically contains a large number of chemicals needed to sort of scour the oil and gas out of the rock. When you bring it back up, you need to dispose of that produced water. Often that happens in an unsafe way. The nice thing, again, about EGS or enhanced geothermal is, you can recirculate the same water over and over again. It may have a few lubricants or other additives, but it's basically just water. And it really shouldn't be coming into contact with the outside world at all, right? It should be a pretty closed system. The other big difference, obviously, is that fracking for oil and gas, as you know, causes climate change, whereas EGS is the key part of enabling us to eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels and fight the climate crisis. So just to wrap up from that foundation, here's what we've accomplished to date. And then here is some of what we can expect. So obviously we're at the dawn of this effort. I think we're very eager to get out and socialize it with key constituencies, seek stakeholder input, and just start the conversation, which I'm hoping that the directors in your roles as elected officials can please direct us to anybody who we should have a conversation with as this progresses. So we're eager to get out there. I mean, we live in the community too. We want to get this done right. So we're excited to see where it all leads. In that vein, here's just a little bit of what we've heard. I think there's a big focus on making sure that, if we are seeing these big construction projects happening in our region, that our local customers, reap the benefits and that we're really, reinvesting here, right? If we're paying for it. So I'd be happy to take any questions and just, thank you again for the opportunity to be here and for considering the resolution of support.
Great. Thank you so much. With that, I will bring it back to my colleagues for any questions. Director Lowe.
You mentioned the potential of causing earthquakes, but what about the impact of earthquakes on the system that are not caused by the system itself?
That's a really good question. Let me get you a better answer after this, but I think my initial reaction is there's a lot of very sort of site-specific research that goes into the development of the project where they look at those kind of factors and make sure that you're drilling through rock that if there is an earthquake is going to be relatively stable or not, collapse the system. And actually, we, as Director Chair Hopkins knows well, we sponsored a bill this past year in the California legislature that passed that related to just that phase, the geothermal exploration phase, where you literally, before you can even start, you have to drill one or multiple wells just to sort of map out the subsurface environment in that kind of granular detail. And it might tell you, to your point, oh, you actually got to drill, you could drill 8,000 feet down at a cost of millions of dollars, only to find, oh, we should actually be 30 yards that way. And the rock there is going to be stronger and more competent for what we're looking for. So I think it's mostly on the front end.
So, I had the privilege of going to Iceland where they have a lot of this. A good portion of the island is geothermal, not all of it. But they do have some, in their case, they have volcanoes, it's a volcanic place. But are we looking at all at some of the systems that they have in places where they have been successful in trying to bring that here?
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm glad you asked. What's exciting and, there's been some progress, like I said, in Iceland and, Indonesia and some other places. But what's exciting, I think, is to date, there's been, I mean, this is really cutting edge, right? There's only been a few projects in the US, but what has been happening has mostly been in Utah. And I think this is really our opportunity, not just as Sonoma Clean Power, but as California to kind of take the lead again on this new clean energy and make it happen. So that's part of why we wanted to be so ambitious, is we know this is something that not just Sonoma Clean Power, but the state's grid as a whole needs. And I want to, it's funny because I was thinking about this beforehand, like 600 megawatts sounds like a lot of power, but then when you think about it, like a giant solar field may only be producing power 1/3 of the time, right? When it's sunny. And so 600 megawatts around the clock is comparable to like a 2000 megawatt solar field. I mean, it'd be one of the biggest clean energy sources in the entire state. And so I think this is a really, to your point, this is for us both about giving our local customers what they need and creating jobs and reinvesting locally, but also, taking on a big chunk of the state's overall grid needs and helping California get to 100% clean energy, which we're, no one else is doing in the state today. So.
Wonderful. Director Corsi?
Thanks for the report, Miles. There's good reason to be excited about this stuff. Couple of questions. You just mentioned the 600 megawatts. What's the total demand that we have in this window at nighttime? The demand that we can't meet now.
Yeah, great question. It really, it depends on the timing, but 600 megawatts is more than we would ever use. I mean, I think our peak demand ever was something in the realm of 500 megawatts. I'll have to get back to you with the exact number, but that was during the most extreme, heat wave, right? So usually it's a lot less than that. And then to your point, a lot of that is already met with our existing contracts for solar or wind or batteries or other sources. The good news is, and so you might ask, why are we pursuing this amount of geothermal, right? I think what we're interested in is, again, that economy of scale and really getting these technologies off the ground at the, level that's sort of needed to catalyze this. And then the good news is there's a huge demand for geothermal around the state. The PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, recently put out a procurement order for about 1,000 megawatts of new geothermal over the next, the years to come. Then the State Department of Water Resources also put something out for another 1,000 megawatts. And then just independently of that, everyone's desperate for these clean resources that can run at night and in the winter anyway, right? So there's great demand. And I think our thesis is, if we can drive this here and we have an agreement with these companies that we're going to get first bite at the apple of any price that they bring to the market, that'll put us in a, a better position than, relying on someone else to build it.
We're potential customers here. What is Sonoma Clean Power's involvement other than?
Yeah, great question. Customer and kind of liaison to the local community, right? So we've been working closely with our partner companies to connect with, whether it's the local unions or, now tribal governments, environmental organizations, others, to both, I think, kind of grease the skids for them to come in and, hopefully nobody's going to be surprised or have too many concerns. And also, if there are questions or concerns, facilitate that dialogue and feedback process. So, because I think, obviously I'm just speculating, but I would imagine like if I live right down the street, if I were told, oh, Chevron wants to come build a large operation, on your block, I would be pretty concerned, right? And so I think what's nice is as the local, public interest agency, we're in a position to help those conversations happen and hold our partners accountable and, make sure that the community feels heard and we're doing this in a way that's beneficial to everyone.
Large number of jobs. Are these plants comparable size to the plants that are there? So there's a lot of jobs that are coming, plumber jobs, chemical engineers, lots of different big paying jobs.
Yeah.
How do these plants compare to the units that are level?
Great question. So one thing to understand, and this isn't what you asked, but just to set the stage. So probably many of you have been up to the geysers and you've seen the, the giant cooling towers and the pipes that go over the road. With these new technologies, one exciting thing is just in terms of the size or footprint, they can actually, produce a very significant amount of energy, but it's really just a big building. You know, there's none of those vast areas of piping on the surface. There's none of those giant cooling towers. So it'll be even less sort of impactful on the surface, which is great. But to your question, you know, we anticipate comparable levels of sort of job creation or I don't know what the right word is. Like, yeah, we anticipate, you know, building a new next generation geothermal plant will have a similar impact on job creation as building one of the conventional plants. And so the last conventional geothermal plant that they built in California just a few years ago was in, I want to say in Yo County, somewhere in the Eastern Sierras. It's called Casa Diablo 4. And that was driving like more than, you know, 500 union jobs at the height of construction. And so there's really high potential here. And that's, you know, I think that's another big thing is, again, this is our local customers' money, you know, paying for these energy resources, right? And if we did nothing, I think there's a reasonable chance that, you know, this next generation geothermal would get built. Again, we think we're helping drive the industry forward, but I think even without us, there's a chance it would happen. It would just happen in Nevada and Utah. And it's really like, you know, then it's a permanent export of wealth. We're creating jobs there. We're not creating jobs for our own local, you know, trades. And so I think that's part of it too, is like, you know, we're paying for it either way. Let's reinvest that here and create jobs locally.
Great. Director Kelly?
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, great question. So
Apologies, I didn't use the microphone. My question is about the map and that there is the existing geysers field in yellow, but then there's an early interest area in red that includes the city of Healdsburg and probably the city of Cloverdale, although it's not labeled. I was just curious, what does that mean?
yeah, great question. So a couple things. So our basic, you know, again, our compact with these companies is that they have to develop their projects in our service territory. Going back to Director Corsi's question, you know, if we're ultimately paying for this, we want to have the economic development locally. So we sort of simplified the map, but they technically wouldn't be allowed to build within city limits of Healdsburg or Ukiah that are not served by Sonoma Clean Power. Beyond that, though, this early interest area, this is really where we think they're likely to operate, just because that's where the hottest rock comes closest to the surface. So it's the most favorable conditions for geothermal. And then you can imagine that shape would extend over into Lake County, but that's not served by Sonoma Clean Power, so it's not part of the geozone. And so we, you know, with Circ Energy, like I said, the idea is to be directly next to an existing geothermal plant at the geysers. So that location, we don't know which one, but that would already be sort of set. With Ever, they haven't, to our knowledge, secured a site or anything like that. And then with Chevron New Energies, they've been sort of rolling out the publicity around this, but it's now out there that they've purchased a property near Cloverdale known as Pocket Ranch as sort of an initial area that they want to explore geothermal in. And whether that's, you know, the ultimate location of a bigger project will depend a lot on their exploration process and kind of what the geology looks like once they start to get more granular. Yeah.
Anything further, or is that it? Okay, great. Director Reynosa?
So thank you for the report. Does Sonoma Clean Power have a contract with PG&E, or have you guys discussed getting them out? Like, you know, your second slide, it's PG&E is the middleman. You know, you talked about affordability. And so in Windsor, we're building about a 300 home, single home, family home neighborhood. So I've been thinking about the microgrid idea. Is this something possible to create a microgrid just for that neighborhood? Is this something that would be open to discussion and see if that's possible?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I would love to, you know, explore that further with you guys at Windsor. I mean, this is why we exist, right? Is to serve the needs of the community. So if this is something that's of interest, let's take a look. And the CCA, our counterpart up in Humboldt County, has had a lot of great success with, you know, microgrids. I think they're doing it more in remote areas that, you know, PG&E thinks is too difficult to reach. But no, it's something we should definitely talk about. And I think that's without getting out over my skis here, I think that's a general topic that CCA, we're one of 24 CCAs around the state. People are increasingly interested in, how do we really take it to the next level in terms of, public power, locally owned public power. So I'd love to facilitate a conversation.
Okay.
Great. Director Harvey?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned a project in Utah,
Mhm.
and I was wondering if you could share with us how far along they are and if there's anything that we've learned based upon their project.
Yeah, great question. And actually, I'm glad you asked because then I'll give a longer answer. There's 2 projects in Utah to be aware of. So the one I mentioned is called Utah Forge. Forge is an acronym, and that's run by the U.S. Department of Energy. And that is testing out this enhanced geothermal concept. And we've learned a lot. I think, for example, I mentioned the seismic safety. They've developed this really sophisticated, they call it the traffic light system, where it's like, okay, green light, keep sending water down, yellow light, proceed with caution, and then red light, shut it down so that an earthquake doesn't happen, right? And there's so many, learnings there, even just in the last few years, about how to really manage the system effectively so that you're not running into any, well, I should never say any, but you're really minimizing that earthquake risk, right? So that, that's one element, but they've also, I think, taught us a lot about community engagement, other elements, right? Workforce development. So that's one. The other one that you may see in the news is the Cape Station project, which is run by Fervo Energy, which is a sort of startup that does enhanced geothermal. And I think this is like our total raison d'etre, right? So there's something in the news a couple months ago about how Fervo Energy had signed a huge deal with Southern California Edison, which is the equivalent of PG&E down there, to supply 300 megawatts of power from Cape Station to SoCal Edison's customers. And again, this is, I think, the trend that we're a little leery of is, California customers paying significant amounts of money for this clean reliability that then is, more expensive because you need more transmission to ship it, right? Less guaranteed because you can see, we're already seeing in Nevada and Utah local opposition crop up to, hey, why are we dealing with these impacts so that California can have power, right? And just again, I'll tell you, inside hot gossip, wow, yeah. But no, all kidding aside, my sister works at Fervo Energy, and so I get the inside scoop, and my perception is there's a they want those jobs just as much as we do, right? I think there's been past examples where the Utah Building Trades, it's not a huge organization. They've brought in people on other projects from California. And I think what we're seeing, not just with this project, but with renewable energy projects all around the West, is now people in these states are saying, no, don't bring in the California workforce. We want all the jobs here, even if it's non-unionized. And so again, if we want to work closely with our local building trades and carpenters and everyone else, we got to build it here so that we're guaranteed to get those jobs and get that reinvestment here locally.
Great question. Any other questions from my colleagues? I have one last question, which you may need to get back to me on because it's kind of a detailed one. And I don't want to sort of pit geothermal against, say, offshore wind. And yet, my question is, do we have any information about kind of like the cost efficiency when you look at these kinds of geothermal systems compared to, offshore wind, and particularly as it relates to ongoing maintenance? And because that's one of the things that I hear a lot, from some folks, especially in the fishing communities, who are concerned about the potential long-term impacts of offshore wind and the maintenance. And there was a lot of news, I think, from the East Coast about turbines falling off and washing ashore and things like that. And so I just wanted to ask that question of how does this kind of compare when we're looking at how do we scale up clean energy? It's recognizing that you probably need the portfolio of all of the things, but just kind of curious how that shakes out.
Yeah, thanks so much. A couple things there. So we don't know the ultimate cost of offshore wind in California, and we actually don't even know the ultimate cost of these geothermal technologies, because they are so new. We're betting that it'll be, cost effective for us, but we can't say it's going to be this or that number, right? So with all that said, I think we have reason to believe that offshore wind is going to be very, very, very expensive for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned. It's very difficult to set up, operate, maintain. And then the other element with the offshore wind in Humboldt is there's no transmission for it right now. And so you're talking about building this vast new transmission system to reach Humboldt, to connect to the offshore wind, through really remote areas. That'll also be difficult to build, operate, and maintain. So, I think, not saying we support it or don't support it, but it's just like, let's just look at, again, like I said, on the East Coast, what we've seen is that these projects come in, and then even just a few years in, before it's even really built, oftentimes the cost is significantly higher than what people thought at the outset, right? And so the state, I think from our perspective, the state is really sort of all in on this offshore wind, which is great. We support that, right? But what we're trying to do is put another option on the table that we think could actually be more cost effective, and that has a little more geographic flexibility too. It's there's different parts of California that have better or worse, hot rock close to the surface, but you don't have to do it in the ocean, right? You can do it closer to transmission, closer to, where people need it. And so we think that this is sort of wise to not put all our eggs in that basket and have a mix of clean reliability options available.
Awesome. And then last question, would you mind sharing the Sonoma Clean Power conversation, a little bit of highlights about Diablo Canyon and how this also pertains to nuclear energy in the state of California?
Yeah, thanks so much. So Diablo Canyon, as many of you know, is a nuclear power plant on the Central Coast that was originally owned and operated by PG&E, and then it was supposed to retire a few years ago. And what happened was, I think reasonably, people said, well, shoot, we don't have enough energy to replace it, right? And so we got to extend the lifespan for another 5 years. This was in 2022. And especially, this was also coming on the heels of that extreme heat wave in 2022, when we realized, wow, if everyone turns on their air conditioner all at once because they needed it to survive, there's really not enough power on the system. And so the governor and the state legislature moved to extend Diablo Canyon at a very high cost to the system. I mean, it's one of the most expensive power resources out there. And so now Diablo Canyon is slated to retire. I think I might be getting this slightly wrong, but I think one unit's supposed to retire in 2029, and then another one's supposed to retire in 2030. And so the whole compact was, okay, we're not gonna, PG&E shouldn't continue to be the sole owner operator of this resource the state has deemed necessary. The State Department of Water Resources, which actually does, despite the name, does a lot of energy stuff, is going to sort of step in and take over Diablo Canyon as a strategic asset. I think PG&E is still involved in the operation, but DWR, Department of Water Resources, is going to kind of handle who gets the power. And so the interesting thing was, then DWR goes around to every power provider in the state and says, okay, here's your kind of proportional cut of the power from Diablo Canyon. Do you want it or not? And what Sonoma Clean Power ran into is we could either accept that Diablo Canyon power, or we could pay for it anyway, not accept it, and then have to go out and re-procure that amount to cover our loss. But either way, we're paying for it. And so there was a discussion at the Sonoma Clean Power Board of Directors that ultimately concluded that, despite our sort of concerns about the cost and concerns about nuclear power, we're either way, we have to pay for it. So we might as well accept the power so we don't have to double procure, and we can kind of minimize the cost to our customers. And so what's interesting is, okay, now we're here. Are we on track to close it in 2029 when it's supposed to close again? And I think the answer is, our opinion would be the answer is no, we're not. And it's kind of, it kind of reminds me of, actually, if I can share a weird analogy, it's like, I think the state's approach here, like I had this Hyundai that was like, it was awful. It had one door handle on the entire car. And I recently got a new car. It's getting to the point where I was like embarrassed to be seen in this thing, right? And so, but I finally got a new car when it was like breaking down and the brakes sounded like a train grinding to a halt. But I was thinking about it after the fact. I was like, why didn't I get a new car earlier? And it's just like, that's what I know. It's easy, right? It's the unknown. And I think the state, our perception is the way the state's thinking about this is, well, the path of least resistance may just be to keep extending this, right? And it's the same with a bunch of these natural gas fired power plants that are slated to retire. You know, it's like, well, that's the devil, you know, right? And actually figuring out how to retire these and bring enough new resources online to offset that would require significant revamping of the state's transmission planning process and some of these permitting and siting processes. And so we're really concerned as an organization that we're just going to sleepwalk into 2029 and say, whoops, we need to, you know, we need to extend this again. So we're looking at what we can do in the legislature and other forums next year to try and sort of force a reckoning now, while there's still time to change course, around, okay, what would it actually take to close Diablo Canyon and close these gas plants that are slated to retire, instead of just getting to that date and saying, whoops, we need to extend it once again.
Awesome. Any final questions? Seeing none, I would ask if there are any members of the public in person who wish to comment or ask questions about this item. Seeing none, I will hand it over to Drew about online commenters.
I did not receive any pre-submitted comments on this item, and I do not see any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, Chair Hopkins.
Great. So I will bring it back to the board. We do have this informational update and also an action item, which would be adopting a resolution in support of this.
So moved. Now that I found the button.
All right, a second director by Director Cater Thompson. So all those, oh, and I just wanted to say also, you know, for the record disclosure, I am a member of the board of Sonoma Clean Power. There is no sort of financial conflict or any other conflict related to this action, but I just did want to state that for the record. And in addition, both Director Corsi and I serve on the Board of Supervisors, which has ultimate permitting authority for anything that would go through an unincorporated Sonoma County per a recent state law that was passed. But we are not taking action on a specific project here. And so therefore, there also is no conflict. It is, we are sort of supporting a general concept here, advancing clean energy for Sonoma County. So did I get everything right, Council? Okay, great. So with that, I will ask all in favor to say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Miles, for the information. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate the partnership between Sonoma Clean Power and SCTA RCPA. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you. And I will see you somewhere else next month. All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our CTP progress report. And I believe that we will be hearing from Adam Garcia remotely. And maybe, do you want to intro or you can go for it? Great.
Quick intro. Good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and directors. Chris Barney, Director of Planning. So one thing we always try to do as part of our comprehensive transportation plan update is look back and see how we've done in the last 4 or 5 years in achieving our goals and objectives of the plan. So Adam Garcia has been able to dig into some of the data and look at some of the metrics we identified that are lined up with some of the CTV goals, and are going to walk through those right now and show kind of how we're doing in that time frame. So I'd love to turn it over to Adam.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
We can.
Wonderful. So as Chris was mentioning, the CTP is a project to help us just evaluate what needs there are across the county. So this is a great chance to look back over the past 5 or so years, or snapshots, and just understand where we're heading by looking backwards. So we'll be looking just briefly at the CTP vision goals, some of the influences on our travel behavior, and then break out into evaluation areas in terms of system, condition and safety, travel efficiency, transit use and active transportation, and then equity and the environment. So the 2050 vision goals, the main points are that we want a transportation system connected and reliable, that's safe and well-maintained, community-oriented and place-based, and has 0 emissions when possible. So to understand a little bit around some of the impacts on our transportation system, obviously, where people are and how they're moving around is important. What we see, the chart on the left really charts back a number of decades and then slows down to the last few years, focusing on the decline in population in Sonoma County. The chart on the right is a little bit more complicated, but overall it shows on the bars the net foreign immigration and domestic migration. So we see largely tracking a little bit before the fires, there was a decline in domestic migration, but significantly after the fires in 2017. The percent change is in green, so that shows the overall growth. So there was that decline between 2016 and 2017 in the growth rate. Looking a little bit more about where people are going to and coming from, Sonoma is a bit of an outlier. In the Bay Area counties where nearly 90% of the trips stay within Sonoma County. However, when we look at where those trips are going to, almost a third of them are going to Marin, followed by Napa, Mendocino County, San Francisco, and Solano. Jumping to system condition and safety, we can take a look at the Pavement Condition Index, or PCI. So these are 3-year averages we're looking at. So there's a mixed bag across the cities, some staying flat, quite a few increasing. But what we can see overall over the past few years is that countywide, Sonoma is actually increasing in their pavement quality. So that's essentially talking about how cracked up, how many potholes are on the street, what's the overall condition of our roads. And so the 2023 is labeled in the chart on the left. Moving over to active transportation, we see the map on the left is a heat map of where the most pedestrian and bicyclist crashes have occurred over the past few years. Mainly focused in downtown areas and main transportation corridors. In Sonoma, in the county of Sonoma, focused in Guerneville and also Sonoma Valley. Looking at overall, though, how are we doing? We can see that the per capita crashes has actually decreased significantly, maybe as a result of COVID after 2019, but even coming out of that, we still show a noticeable lower rate of crashes across the county, which might be attributed to our increase in bicycle facilities, which we'll get to shortly. But first, turning our view to our transit vehicles, this is looking at the overall operation of our transit lines. The chart on the lower left is a ribbon chart. So what that shows you is that the greatest value is always going to be on the top. So as you go through the years, you have different rankings switching over. So we notice obviously the serious decline in transit vehicle revenue hours from COVID. But overall, Sonoma County Transit has had the most number of hours out on the roads, serving our people, our population. In terms of the average fleet age, we can see just the comparison how these are for bus and fleets specifically, and train. For Golden Gate Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, Sonoma County Transit, Petaluma Transit, and SMART. So some of them have decreased. I think Golden Gate Transit looks like to be the only one that has actually increased in their average fleet age between that time period. In terms of the next section, travel efficiency, one of the only measures we have to accurately assess how much hours of delay has actually been on the US 101. So a route that we're all familiar with. Overall, since 2019, there's been approximately a 9% decrease in the hours of delay. To note where else in the county, though, there are most congested, we can see those darker orange areas on the map show where the greatest hours of delay are. across the county. That's based off the Sonoma County transportation model. And then in terms of average trip length, our chart on the left, we see where overall both trips staying within the county and outside of the county shows us kind of the total average trip length. However, when we break it down to just the trip length within that jurisdiction, we can see there's a dramatic drop, which really, I think, supports a lot of the argument that we're making, that a lot of those local trips that happen within the city or jurisdiction can be replaced by active modes of transportation if, you know, those modes are properly protected for more variety of more users. Let's see, in terms of the next section, transit use and active transportation. Is probably no big surprise, this chart shows us that people driving alone is still the main way that folks get to their work. However, what has switched, and obviously is probably not a surprise either, is the increase in work from home from about 19,000 people in 2019 to about 31. So that transitioned other modes away, including carpooling on the screen there. Zooming down to those smaller layers, we can see that most modes have declined also, except actually an increase in the miscellaneous kind of taxi cab, motorcycle, and other means, which might be a tip to more micro mobility devices or potentially some of the rideshare programs. Let's see, as I mentioned earlier, we have seen quite an increase in the number of bicycle facilities. This chart is, or this slide is a little bit busy, but it shows us 3 separate ways we can classify bicycle facilities. The most protected are the separated bikeways, class 1 and class 4. So those increase from 93 miles in 2019 to a whopping 245 in 2023. Primarily in the class 1, there's only been a small increase in the class 4. For dedicated bike lanes, that's the middle section, class 2 and class 2B. So bike lanes and buffered bike lanes, that increased from 223 and almost doubled to 439. And then lastly, the shared bicycle lane with vehicles, class 3 and class 3B, also showed an increase from 53 miles to 158 miles. This ribbon chart shows us the overall total passengers or the ridership, and it's broken out just by the Sonoma County routes as well as paratransit. So a number of the Golden Gate Transit routes that don't serve Sonoma County are excluded. And so what we can see is obviously that dip from 2019 from COVID-19, but that also Santa Rosa City Bus remained as the transit provider carrying the most passengers. When we combine our 2 previous measures, though, when we think about passengers and then revenue hours as well, so passengers per revenue hours, gives us a sense of what the efficiency of those modes are. So how many hours does it take to essentially move the most people? So here we notice the rise of SMART kind of in the middle of the pack in 2019 and now kind of leading in 2024, showing the increase in ridership, but also just the efficiency of the trains as well in moving large numbers of people. And our last section, just a few more charts. The one on the upper right shows us the driving costs. So whether you're driving about 10,000, 15, or 20,000 miles each year, the cost of driving, cost per mile increases nationally. So that's an added cost to our lives of just more expensive vehicle maintenance. For our other two charts, the greenhouse gas emissions and the vehicle miles traveled, what we're seeing kind of from that transition from 2018 to 2020 is obviously a kind of artificial drop that's a result from COVID-19, which we think is probably more normalized now in 2022. Both VMT and CO2 emitted increased just marginally from 2020 to 2022. So that's probably closer to where our current new normal is after COVID. So also one of the probably no big surprise is that transportation remains the main source of our emissions, primarily from the use of automobile, followed by building emissions. One of the highlights, though, is there's a small, tiny little blue bar at the top of each of the years. That's the emissions associated with water conveyance and water treatment. In years previous to that, it was larger, but thanks to the efforts of Sonoma Clean Power and Sonoma Water, that is significantly decreased and is definitely something we can be proud of in the county. So with that, I will maybe stop my presentation and see if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Adam. With that, I will bring it back to the board for any questions or comments on this item. Seeing none, I will, oh, Director Kelly.
Sorry, I just had a quick one, but I'm trying to find the graph that's associated with it. Give me just one moment. For the vehicle revenue hours for transit, sorry. I'm looking at this graph and I'm trying to understand I obviously understand the year axis. Can you describe how the revenue hours over are calculated in this context? We've been kind of looking at a variety of the different transit providers and just understanding what does this mean? And I think you have so in another slide as it relates to the volume of passengers. Can you talk about how that formula is calculated?
Yeah, let's see if I could just share my screen again real quick. So in the transit vehicle revenue hours, this is showing across the fleet of these different transit providers, how many hours are they out on service, driving on the road, providing transit service. So this on the far left shows us about a little over 400,000 in total. And then that is decreased to just a little over 300,000 revenue hours. So that's obviously at an annual level. Does that help answer? I can show you the other one too to connect the
totally.
dots.
So it's not a judgment on anything. It's just the quantity of hours they're on the road.
Yeah, just a pure measure of the quantity of hours. The one where you maybe have a little bit of judgment was the last one in terms of passengers per revenue hour. So how many people are riding each of those individual cars or trains per hour? So how many people are you moving per hour essentially is kind of a way to think about it also.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will ask if any members of the public in person have any questions or comments on this item. Seeing none, Drew, do we have anyone online?
We do. All right, 1 second. And in the meantime, I will mark for the record that we did receive a pre-submitted public comment from Eris Weaver of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. I did provide that to the SCTA RCPA Board of Directors, and it will be posted online after this meeting. And with that, we will start with Tom Conlon. If I can get that open. Alrighty, Tom, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Tom Conlon here in Sonoma Valley. Fascinating data as always from your analytics staff there. I just wanted to point out an observation that I've had in looking over these data is that in the comparative, the means of transportation to work slide, as well as in the one you just talked about, Ariel just brought up the transit vehicle revenue hours slide. It's important to realize that the context is that we spend half of our sales tax revenue collected in the county on the train, the SMART train. And yet the level of service provided by those two, by that service is really, really quite low compared to the transit service offered by your other operators. So I just encourage everybody to think about that. As Chair Hopkins mentioned, we do want to pay attention to the cost efficiency of the geothermal versus wind systems. And the same thing is true in transit modes. So thanks for the consideration of that comment.
All right, thank you, Tom. Double check. Chair Hopkins, I do not see any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
All right, I will bring it back, and I actually first want to see if any of the SMART directors had any response to Tom's remark, or if there was any comment about kind of the cost efficiency, because I don't know if Chris or Adam or directors Bagby or Corsi, I'm trying to remember who else is on the SMART board.
Yeah, I'd be happy to comment on that. So we haven't looked at the cost of service specifically in this, but that's definitely something we could do and go back and look at. So we've looked at just, the broad spectrum of service that's out there, whether or not there are people on the trains or the buses, and then looking at how full they are as well. But we could definitely dig into the cost of service that's definitely available. And we'd be happy to report on that in our final CTP. And make that available as well. So that information's out there. We can dig into that for sure.
Thank you, Director Corsi.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Tom. I'd be happy to talk to you about this further when I have some other data in front of me. The cost of running a train is certainly higher than running a bus, but the efficiency is, we've done some fairly detailed analysis of that at SMART. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but I'd be happy to talk with you about it. Also, just want to point out that some of these charts are talking about passenger loads in 2022 versus passenger hours in 2024. And the number of passengers carried annually by SMART in that time has increased several times. We're close to 900,000 passengers a year now. It was quite a bit smaller in 2022. But Tom, give me a holler and we can dig deeper into this.
Thank you so much, Director Corsi. Director Kelly?
Thanks. I had a question about the bike facilities slide and just how the data is being depicted for bike lanes. And we did receive this comment from Eris Weaver at the Bicycle Coalition. And I think just in the process right now that we've been going through with our active transportation plan and planning for some of the cities as well, the regional ATP, that the language that we use around bike facilities and what we call separated bike lanes versus shared lanes, and the request was around from Eris was around how are we categorizing these? So separated lanes that are truly separated with a buffer, like class 1 and class 4, versus class 2 and class 2B, which are only separated by paint. And her comment was paint is not protection, which I think is evident, is supported by the data around collisions. And so I wanted to find out from both the board, but also from Adam, is that something that we can discuss and maybe depict differently as we talk about the type of bike facilities, so that when we say separated, we actually mean physically separated, which we know is informed by the data that actually protects bicyclists, versus separated by paint, which we know doesn't actually prevent those injuries, and then the shared bicycle lanes, which are just bikes on the roadway, basically. I think that, to her comment, as we talk about kind of really focusing in on bike facilities in this county and investing time and resources, I want to be sure that we're communicating to the public and reviewing data appropriately so that we're making informed decisions that's actually preserving, protecting bicyclists and preserving life on our roads.
Yeah, that's a great question. I might actually just defer to Dana, who's leading the ATP project, to see if she has any specific comments on just kind of the wording and what's making sure that's consistent with the ATP.
Let me just kick this off before Dana goes and just say that, the original slides in the presentation that did not differentiate between class 1 and class 4, which are very different than class 2 and class 2 buffer, right? Class 2 and class 2 buffer do not have that physical barrier that provides that low stress network that's desired. So within Go Sonoma, when we did the set aside of 12% for build bikeways and pathways, it is designed to prioritize the class 1 and the class 4 facilities that actually provide that buffer of either a physical barrier of a parked car, a barrier, or something off of the roadway network. And then Adam, if you could share your screen one more time with the new bike lane slide that does not match the slide that is within your packet. It's an updated slide. You can see that we really look at the metrics in a way that it prioritizes at the top level, that buffered facility at the top, and then separating out the numbers. Whereas in our original presentation, we did lump together class 1 and class 4 combined with class 2 and class 2B, which was an error on our side, and we appreciate the comments from the Bicycle Coalition. Dana, did you want to add to that? Or?
This is really helpful and actually answers the question, because what we have in the packet is the old slide, and what was shown makes more sense, and appreciate it seeing it this way. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Director Corsi?
Just, James, could you make sure we all get that slide? Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Bagby.
Yeah, I thank you for that clarification. The, bike infrastructure, I think, is something that is important to all of us. And one of the backbones of the bicycle infrastructure is the smart multimodal pathway. And I think some of the confusion that is out there is about the 1/4 cent sales tax that is approved by the voters of Marin and Sonoma County. Not only goes to fund train operations, it also goes directly to that multimodal trail. I think what we're finding is that the reason that smart ridership is wildly successful right now is that it's including more and more cities. And if you know your history and you know your geography, it's not really that surprising. This is why our region was so successful with using using the rail lines 100 years ago. It is why the downtown stations were the hub of economic development and the hub of community connection 100 years ago. And watching them come to life again is so incredibly satisfying. And I don't understand why people are so surprised by it. And I think we're going to, see that result. We're already seeing that result in development in downtown Santa Rosa. We're going to see the result of the ridership numbers when SMART reaches Windsor just next year. I can't believe how quickly that's going to be here. And of course, that's a community that was already developed with transit-oriented development guidelines like the one that we are seeing on this slide. And I think that the ridership numbers are going to be astounding. I see the same thing in the future for when SMART reaches Healdsburg. And I'm looking forward to the day that, again, we have that historic train line that is the basis of our community and our economic development and the success of the agriculture from 100 years ago. We're going to see that repeated in the information age, because once again, the rail line and the bike lanes are going to be connecting our communities. This is a really enlightening presentation. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the questions from the audience, but I wanted to make sure that there was a really clear understanding of the fact that that quarter-cent sales tax is going to both train operations and the build out of that multimodal trail. So but I want to, thank you again for the presentation. And I really look forward to today that to the day when all of our communities are benefiting from this bicycle, the best case scenario of our bicycle infrastructure connecting to that smart multimodal trail.
Great. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? I just want to say thank you so much, Adam and Chris, for such wonderful information. I love getting this kind of a report card, and in many ways, it's actually heartening to see the progress that we're making. I know that we always feel like progress is very slow, but being able to see the changes over a few years is really wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing the data and for continuing this important work. Appreciate it. And with that, that is just a report item, not an action. So we are going to go ahead and turn to our favorite topic for some of us, perhaps, Highway 37. So hand it over to David.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, directors. I'm pleased to provide you an update on the Resilient State Route 37 program. And I have with me partners online, Ricky Gao from Caltrans and Kevin Chen from MTC, who will be assisting with the presentation. Bear with me. Slide. So to give you an overview of the presentation this afternoon, we'll be having updates from Caltrans on the planning environmental linkages addendum that they're wrapping up, the Novato Creek Bridge replacement status in Marin County, and then we'll be turning over to MTC to discuss the Sears Point to Merritt Island Improvement Project, and also some considerations related to that project occurring around the long-term causeway. And I'll be wrapping up with a discussion on some funding for the board's consideration under Regional Metro 3, and also selection to the RM3 or to the Highway 37 Policy Committee. With that, I'll turn over to Ricky Gao.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, board members and everyone. Ricky Gao from Caltrans District Division Chief for Project Management. So as many of you know that we completed the planning and the environmental linkage study in 2022, identified the existing corridor as the preferred alternative to build the elevated causeway to address sea level rise through year 2130. And what's left out was how are we going to prioritize the 8 segment identified by the PAL study. That's why Caltrans, together with SCTA and other transportation authorities in the North Bay and MTC SMART formed the group to conduct the PAL addendum to prioritize the recommended priority of the 8 segment identified by the initial PAL study. And this is a collaborative process along with the TAs, city and counties, and along the route, tribes, environmental advocacy groups, resource agencies, and individuals from the public to conduct the process to identify the criteria and go through the similar process as we did for the PAL study through the technical working group and the stakeholder working group. So next slide. The prioritization group identified the criteria such as flood vulnerability, environmental efficiency, safety, cost, constructability, opportunity to phase, etc., and go through the rigorous technical working group and the stakeholder working groups. And what's showing on the slide is the prioritization ranking summary. Number 2, highlighted in orange, is the segment between US 101 and the Atherton Avenue that was identified as the top priority and one of the project Novato Creek Bridge is already under the way, and this segment has cleared the environmental phase. The second and fourth priority is section 6 and 7. That's tied. Section 6 is the 37 and 121 intersection, and 7 is Sears Point to Mare Island, the ultimate causeway between Sears Point to Mare Island. And section 4, which is between Petaluma River Bridge and Lakeview Highway, that is past the Lakeview Highway, that is the lower portion of 37 protected by the levee, that's ranked number 4. And the rest of the causeway segments are ranked lower priority from 5th to 8th. So this is the ranking. And next slide. Now, what are the steps after the PEL prioritization rankings? So Caltrans, along with the State Route 37 partners, are secured, is in the process of secure funding, advancing the final design for the section 2, which is between US 101 and Atherton for the phase 2, which is outside of the Novato Creek for the long-term design phase, and also initiate environmental review for the section 6 and 7. Again, it's the 37-121 intersection and between Sears Point to Mare Island for the long-term project. And also we have been ongoing coordination effort with SMART, and then deliver the remaining section based on the priority. So these are the steps after the PEL prioritization. Next slide. Just want to give everybody an update on the Novato Creek Bridge replacement project. As I mentioned before, this is the top priority. So environmental phase has already cleared. Currently, project is in design to be the first construction package of the larger flood reduction project, and it's the first long-term resiliency project under State Route 37 program. And the project will address the recurring flooding in this area to the sea level rise of projected year 2130 elevation. Phase 2, which is outside of the Novato Creek Bridge, highlighted in blue, is not funded yet. The goal is to complete the design of the Novato Creek Bridge replacement, highlighted in red, by May 26th, and begin construction of the Novato Creek Bridge replacement by May 27. Next slide, please. And here are a few renderings and visual stimulation for the Novato Creek and the flood reduction. What you've seen here, this is the long-term flood reduction after the Novato Creek Bridge is completed. Will connect to the US 101 interchange all the way to Atherton Avenue. Next slide, please. Again, another view of the Novato Creek Bridge. And next slide, please. And this is the flood reduction for the entire segment 2. And that concludes my part, and I'll turn it to Kevin. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ricky. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Chen with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on the Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project. This is one of the near-term projects on the 37 corridor between Sears Point and Mare Island, is shown in blue here in this map, the top right corner. This project is really intended to address the severe traffic congestion that happens on a daily basis on this corridor. Equity really is an underlying issue on this corridor, because this corridor serves a lot of folks, living in on the East Bay side with more affordable homes in Vallejo and other parts of the East Bay, commuting the corridor for jobs over in Marin and Sonoma counties. And this project is intended to address that congestion and equity issue. With this project, we're going to be widening the middle portion of the corridor from 121 to Mare Island from 2 to 4 lanes. We'll be converting the existing lane to an HOV lane that will be 24/7. And as part of the project, we'll be providing new toll lanes on the outside in this middle stretch. This project will also include a replacement of the Tolly Creek Bridge with a longer bridge that would allow for tidal wetland restoration. Now, for really for funding purposes, we are planning to deliver the project in 3 phases. The first phase would include the Tully Creek Bridge replacement I just mentioned. It will also include some improvements at the SR 121 Highway 37 intersection to provide an HOV jump lane and really to improve the operations of the intersection. The first phase is estimated at about $92 million, and currently we have secure funding to be able to deliver phase 1. Phase 2 of the project includes providing eastbound widening, so building out the eastbound direction of the corridor, and we will also initiate tolling in the eastbound direction as part of phase 2. The total cost estimate for phase 2 is about $251 million, and it's partially funded currently. Phase 3 of the project is to finish up the westbound direction, including tolling for the westbound, and that cost is estimated at $157 million. That is also partially funded at the moment. Now to give you a summary of, I guess, recent activities on this corridor as part of this project, we've completed the environmental clearance of the Tully Creek Bridge replacement, which was done through an addendum to the environmental document that was completed in spring of 2023. We were able to do it efficiently as an addendum, mainly because it's mainly within the project's original study footprint. So that was done earlier this year. We've also recently just submitted funding requests for the Senate Bill 1, SB 1 funding programs, which we've submitted for the Trade Corridor Program, the Solutions for Congested Corridor Program, as well as the Local Partnership Program. Hoping that we are successful in securing those funds that would allow us to deliver phase 2 of the project. In terms of upcoming milestones, the project team is working on completing the environmental clearance on one of the additional components that we've added in the last year or so, which is called the Strip Marsh East Enhancement. And I have a map to show that later. So that footprint was outside of the original environmental document, and therefore we have to do a what's called a supplemental EA at the federal level. And we're anticipating to complete that supplemental document later this month and then circulate it out for public review. In a parallel process, Caltrans is taking the lead in securing a construction manager, general contractor, CMGC, to help deliver this project. So the procurement is underway, and hopefully we'll get a CMGC on board by about February of next year. For the rest of the project, final design is ongoing, in particular for phase 1, which includes the Tully Creek Bridge replacement. It's scheduled to complete design next year, and we are on target to list the project for bid by November of 2025. The next milestone would be for CTC to make a decision on SB 1 funding. So again, we've applied for funding for phase 2, and by June of next year, we will be able to find out from the CTC whether we are selected for the award. And last but not least, construction for phase 1 would start in 2026. Now on this project, as we know, it sets on a very environmentally sensitive area. So there are fully protected species habitats in the project area. And the current Fish and Game Code does not allow for incidental take of the listed species as part of a capacity increasing project, which is this project. So new legislation or additional legislation would be required to allow for that take. Unfortunately, I guess that effort did not move forward earlier this year, but we are continue to look for support with project partners and others to try to advance this legislation forward. That will be very critical from a timings perspective on this project to be able to proceed with permitting and for construction in a timely manner. Because without it, basically the construction window gets very short, which means that the delivery of the project will be stretched out a lot longer. Next, please. As part of the project, actually in the last few months, we've worked with the partners and a number of state agencies to identify other opportunities that might be there as part of the Tolly Creek Bridge replacement to provide more environmental benefits in the project vicinity. So we've done 2 workshops, I think, between September and November. And yeah, I think in the later slide, I'll explain that the Tolly Creek Bridge will help facilitate a lot of the the restoration efforts. And in this graphics, you can see that on the left-hand side, you can see the existing bridge in orange, which is a very short bridge, about 60 feet or so. And with the current project, we're proposing to replace with a longer bridge at about 375 feet, as you can see on the right-hand side. So that's part of the near-term project, estimated to complete by 2028 or so. Now, with a longer bridge, we would be able to, that would enable us to help facilitate a lot of the restoration efforts that are planned as part of the Sonoma Creek Baylands strategy. Next slide, please. So looking longer term, this picture shows you what the long-term project may look like. Ricky mentioned earlier that with other partners, we just gone through a prioritization process of the long-term project. This would give you a visualization of what the long-term project may look like in this area. So everything in green is basically elevated causeway throughout this whole stretch, from west of 121 going further east. And as part of long-term vision, we're also looking at completely reconstructing the SR37 and SR121 interchange with flyovers or direct connectors, if you will, as shown in purple here. So it will be a fully grade separated interchange here to really help accommodate future travel demand looking at the very long term. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you a kind of side-by-side comparison between the near-term bridge and the long-term bridge. We can start with the left-hand side with the near-term replacement bridge. The environmental phase is already fully completed. The funding to deliver the near-term bridge replacement has been secured. And we are anticipating the construction in 2026 and complete it by 2028. And with that project, not only will we be able to get the congestion relief, as part of the project, we'll also be able to initiate transit service on this corridor, which will really get back at addressing the equity issue on this corridor. As I mentioned earlier, the new Tolly Creek Bridge would allow for restoration efforts going through the Tolly Creek, the Tolly Creek going north-south of the corridor, and that we can get that work done before 2030, which is the anticipated sea level rise year. The cost, as I mentioned earlier, is about $92 million. The $92 million for the first phase includes the Tolly Creek Bridge, as well as some of the SR121 improvements that I mentioned earlier. Now, looking to the right side, the long-term bridge, the environmental phase work has not begun yet. Ricky mentioned earlier, it's a priority. I think, we like to set aside funding to get that work started, but that phase of work has not started. And currently, there's no funding secured for design, right-of-way, or construction for the long-term work here. Furthermore, I guess for the long-term consideration, we would need to consider a fully grade separation with a smart rail that crosses Highway 37 just east of 121. So that would just add another level of complexity to the work. Because it is a very big undertaking, it will take a very long time to deliver that. So in the near term, we will still have a lot of congestion that we have to deal with. Now, the long-term bridge replacement, along with a fully grade separated 121 intersection, grade separation with SMART and so forth, will cost somewhere between the $600 million range to $1.2 billion range. 600, I think, is in the current cost, like current dollars. And then if you escalate it to future construction dollars, it will be north of $1 billion. So you can see that's a huge difference between what we can deliver in the near term as well as, the much more substantial undertaking for the long-term bridge replacement. Next, please. So in the workshops that I mentioned earlier, with all the project partners and the resource agencies, we also try to identify ways that we can further improve the near-term project to help with the restoration effort. So what you can see here in this figure is on the right-hand side with the new bridge that's 375 feet long. We will be doing a little bit of, we were planning on doing some excavation under the current bridge in order to build a new bridge. Now, for all the planned restoration as part of the Sonoma Baylands Creek strategy, there will be a lot more tidal flow that's planned when all the restoration do happen. So to accommodate for that, we would actually need to do further excavation, as you can see here on this graphics to the right-hand side. So the little red arrow does indicate, the additional excavation below what we would be doing for the bridge work would be important to help facilitate the restoration work. Now, the additional excavation work is not part of the current project estimate. So we will have to work very closely with all the resource agencies, along with Sonoma Land Trust and other folks, to really better understand the timing of the restoration effort, as well as the amount of additional excavation that's needed. And then once we understand, we can better understand the scope and the cost it would take to get there. Then we also need to identify funding to do this additional excavation. Yeah, so with this near-term project, with a 375 feet bridge, we will be able to help facilitate, I guess, somewhere in the 200 to 300 acres of Tully Creek watershed restoration. Next slide, please. Here's an illustration of the Sonoma Creek Baylands strategy. I guess on the left-hand side, you can see the various tidal flows in the different colors. So I guess the probably in the red color is where the Tully Creek Bridge is. So again, just kind of emphasizing that the project will bring a lot of benefits to for you to realize the restoration benefits from the Sonoma Creek Baylands strategy. You would need both the restoration as well as the new bridge to achieve that. In addition, this project is also going to be delivering what's called a strip marsh east enhancement that I mentioned earlier. So that's shown in the graphics to the right-hand side. Circled to the right-hand side, that's in Solano County, south of the highway in red. That component will also be providing, I think, up to 900 acres of wetland restoration. So with this project, we will be doing a lot of wetland restoration or enable wetland restoration. What we'd like to do is to work with CDFW to really pursue an advanced mitigation credit option, because this project is really meant to be a multi-benefit project. It's a transportation project, but it also brings ecological enhancement. It helps with the restoration. And therefore, we would definitely like to work with CDFW to come up with that advanced mitigation credit option. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to capture, I guess, some of the three key outcomes from the workshop is looking for ways to achieve the additional excavation that's needed under the Tully Creek channel, and then really to pursue advanced mitigation options with CDFW. And then I think David will talk about this a little bit more, is to start advancing the long-term environmental work for the SR37, SR121 intersection, as well as the long-term Tully Creek Bridge environmental clearance. With that, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So as the board heard, there is a funding need for that long-term 37-121 intersection. when the voters approved regional measure 3, there was 100 million set aside for the Highway 37 corridor. The board previously approved a memorandum of understanding of the 4 North Bay counties and MTC to distribute those funds. And now we're looking at how we can distribute those funds to meet some of the project needs in the corridor. Currently, there's about 35 million that's committed to the corridor, 15 million for the Fairgrounds interchange in Vallejo, which has started construction, 20 million for the Sears Point to Mare Island improvement project corridor, and then the rest of the funds were committed in the MDU, but they're not designated for a specific project. And that includes funds for looking at the 37-121 interchange for SCTA, a levy study for Transportation Authority of Marin, and also funding that was set aside for Transportation Authority of Marin and SCTA for future improvements throughout the corridor. Right now, there's an additional 30 million that is needed to get us to the finish line for the Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project Phase 2 to leverage those funds to secure the Senate Bill 1 funds that we're applying for. And there's also another 25 million that's needed for cost increases on the Wild Creek Bridge replacement that Ricky described earlier. To start the work on the Highway 37-121 interchange, we are recommending that 10 million be set aside for that project. It may not be the full amount that we need, but it will get us a good start on that long-term environmental document. Should also note that the board designates members for the Highway 37 Policy Committee. There was originally 12 members, 3 members from each of the 4 North Bay counties appointed that committee. And then last year, that policy committee was expanded with a number of ex officio members, including the tribal chairs of the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria and the Ujade Wet'suwet'en Nation, and then representatives from the congressional offices and the state Senate offices and assembly districts. So that rose the committee from 12 to 22 members. Currently, Susan Gorin is one of the members on the policy committee, and she is leaving office shortly. Rebecca Hermseal was elected to replace her on the Board of Supervisors, and staff are recommending that she replace her on the policy committee. She currently serves on the policy committee actually as a representative of Congressman Thompson, is very familiar with the corridor. The past practice has been to appoint both the MTC commissioners and the BCBC representative to the policy committee, and we recommend appointing Supervisor Hermseal to the policy committee. And with that brings us to staff recommendations. We recommend that you authorize the executive director to negotiate and the chair to sign an amendment to the Resilient State Route 37 MOU to update the distribution of the original Measure 3 funding. And then we also recommend appointing Supervisor-elect Hermseal to replace Supervisor Gorin on the policy committee. With that, staff are available for any questions you may have, along with Ricky and Kevin. We thank them for joining us for this presentation.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Director Kelly.
I'll just quickly comment, wow, this is a massive project with a lot of moving parts on a very long timeline with so many multi-jurisdictional issues, transit issues, transportation issues, environmental issues. I mean, really, it's the Super Bowl of exciting future.
In California.
Yes.
right?
But really just want to say thank you so much to this team, which I know is partially represented here, but wow, there's a lot of folks who are doing great work on bringing this forward. So thank you. And also just, we recognize the gargantuan task that is in front of you all, as well as all the agencies involved. So thank you for the update. And also we, are here to support. We see this as a key connector for our region. We know how critical it is to get out in front of sea level rise. And also we're already behind when you think about the transportation challenges along this corridor that exists now. So thank you, and looking forward to continuing to support this work moving forward.
Thank you so much, Director Kelly. Anything else to add? I think that you said it very well. Although instead of Super Bowl, I was more thinking about Sisyphus, or I'm pushing up a giant thing up a mountain. And huge kudos to my incoming colleague for being willing to take this on, because obviously there are no easy solutions on this one, and it is a long, involved process. So with that, I would ask if any members of the public in person wish to speak on this item. Seeing none. Drew, do we have anyone online?
We do have one member online. Let me pull that up. We have Rick Letman. Rick, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Chair Hopkins, for this opportunity. I'm Rick Letman. I live in Roanoke Park, and I'm a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee to this board. As you know, there have been a lot of public hearings on the problems of Highway 37. I attended most of them. I heard a lot of creative ideas from the public about ways to deal with the congestion problem on Highway 37. I realized that there's two problems, and congestion is one, inundation is the other. But I wanted to talk about the congestion problem. There were ideas suggested by the public that I thought were very reasonable for ferry alternatives to the Highway 37 corridor and rail alternatives as well. But today I heard nothing about any of those. It was all about highways. You know, Vallejo has a ferry terminal, so does Larkspur. They have ferry service to and from these terminals, but there's nothing between them. And I don't understand that. A ferry connection between Larkspur and Vallejo would provide an alternative to commuting on Highway 37 for those low-wage workers from Marin who can't afford to live there, but do find affordable housing in the Vallejo area. There's already a smart track between Novato and Brazos, and connections from there to the National Railroad Network in Suisun, and it's in use. There are several times a week freight service across that track to bring grain to 4 customers in Petaluma. It could be upgraded very cheaply compared to the cost of these roads to provide commute service there. It's rather ironic that in some of the artist renderings that we saw today, there were smart trains on tracks beside the highways, but not a single word about putting those trains there as a service to those trying to commute on Highway 37. I really wish that some more was done with these alternatives than simply pouring more concrete. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Next we have is Sally Davis. Sally, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Well, this is Steve Bertelbaugh. I'm on my wife's computer.
Hi, Steve.
Just following up, this is a very complex project, and Caltrans and MTC and the board that's been working on this for years has done a great job in moving a lot of it. There was a mention of transit, and most people in about 55% of the people using that route are carpooling. So the transition from carpools to transit is going to be complicated. And the idea that you have a diamond lane that runs half of the route without the last half of the route is going to be a problem for transit. So we would like to see some way to get that diamond lane to go all the way from one side to the other. The other issue is that in order to pay for the B section between Mare Island and Sears Point, a toll was established. But that toll will affect people from Vallejo, but not people who are getting onto the road from Sonoma. And so I think that has got to be cured one way or another, so that you pay a toll based on the miles that you drive rather than where you come from and where you're going. So I just wanted to mention those things. They're kind of minor, but in the long run, they're going to play a big role in whether this does reduce congestion or not. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next we have is Tom Conlon. Tom, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yes, thanks. Again, from Sonoma Valley. Obviously, lots of good progress since the last time I saw this planning work. So I appreciate Ricky and Kevin's presentations this afternoon. I have a couple questions to do with the $92 million phase one near-term bridge over Toll Lake Creek. Great to see that there's additional excavation and restoration, excellent additions to the project there. But I'm concerned about the life cycle of that $92 million investment. And I don't really have a clear idea of that. I think that life cycle could be determined by two things. It could be determined by how soon we get funding to replace it, or it could be determined by natural conditions of climate change. So I think we have some projections about when that bridge would be inundated or become subject to inundation. So I hope maybe we could present that to the board today, if that's known. And then the other question would be if I'm troubled by the impact on the listed species, but I'm hopeful that the enhanced restoration might benefit them in the long run. So if that's something I've dreamt up, I'd like to not repeat it as a mistake. But if that's a potential benefit of the enhanced restoration near term, I'd like to understand that better. Thank you for your consideration of my questions.
Thank you, Tom. Chair Hopkins, I do not see any members of the public wishing to speak on this item further.
Thank you so much. And I'd love to give you all an opportunity to respond to some of the public comments. David, if you wanted to start, and then you could refer to your colleagues.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To first address the potential for ferry service that was looked at in the planning environmental linkages study by Caltrans, and it's not necessarily precluded by this, but the conditions in the San Pablo Bay lines really make it difficult to run ferry service, very shallow. The ridership is not very high. There actually was an earmark around 20 years ago to implement ferry service at Port Sonoma that never really went anywhere because it wasn't viable to do it and the funds were repurposed for other purposes. Doesn't preclude the potential for ferry service in the future, but it wouldn't really serve the existing commute patterns very well. For the rail service, SMART did complete a feasibility study back in 2018, looking at the east-west corridor from Novato to the Fairfield-Sassoon Amtrak station in Solano County, and they looked at a cost estimate around $500 million to over $1 billion to implement rail service on that corridor. That would be using existing tracks at existing elevation. So same as 37, those tracks would be subject to sea level rise as the existing SMART line is already today at Highway 101 at the 37 interchange. To elevate the tracks further, that would be a very expensive cost. And it's something that SMART and the partners are looking at with Caltrans right now. There's the project study report being completed by Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transit, looking at implementing rail service between Novato and Solano County. However, that is a very high level study and it will be taking a number of years to catch up. But the idea is, and it's studied in the Pell, to look at not only the highway corridor, but also the parallel rail corridor, how they can accommodate and be potentially even within the same right of way. So it's definitely something that we're considering and looking at. Just the highway projects are moving along a bit faster than the rail projects. And with that, I will turn to my colleagues to see if they have any other remarks they'd like to add.
Thank you, David. Again, this is Ricky Gao from Caltrans. David summarized really well. And in the Caltrans 2022 Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, we did look into several other modes of transportation for State Route 37 long-term corridor, including floating bridge, ferries, passenger rail, auto train, bus, tunnel, and tolling. So with that said, some of the alternative modes are not feasible. For example, the ferry challenges David just mentioned. So I just want to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Bringing back to the directors, any other questions? Director Hinton.
I was just curious, the one thing you did not address was the suggestion about tolls from both sides. I'm pretty experienced on that corridor and you've got people going skiing that are not getting tolled and you've got workers coming across from Vallejo that are paying the toll. So I really think that you should really dig into that for the future. It doesn't seem very equitable. knowing who is on that commute.
And through the chair, if I may, the team currently is designing tolling in both directions. The toll gantry would be located just east of 121 on Tubbs Island. And the first phase and phase 2 of tolling, as Ken mentioned earlier, would include the eastbound tolling. And so it'd be about half the toll in that direction. And then once we have funding for the third phase, for the westbound, we'd be implementing tolling in the westbound direction. So it would capture people going in both directions on 37. It just wouldn't capture people taking the turnoff to Sonoma on Highway 121, since the toll gantry would be east of Highway 121. And to go back to one of the earlier questions, the near-term Tully Creek Bridge that is being designed right now, it is a near-term project and it is an interim project, since we do not have the $1 billion or so needed for long-term bridge. And so it has design life of probably 20 to 30 years, depending on how fast sea level rise occurs. And so we are cognizant that that is a near-term investment that will need to be replaced in the future by that long-term project, which is why we're asking to start that work now.
Thank you so much for that. You know, one other thing that I think has been on the mind, partly because it's been in the news, is really looking at a congestion pricing kind of a model. And I know that one of the public commenters mentioned looking at, you know, sort of how far you're traveling, you know, versus just a simple toll. And I was just wondering if that's being explored in terms of peak pricing, and essentially having a variable tolling model based on time of day.
I'll defer to Kevin as our tolling expert.
Well, I can say I'm the expert. I'll chime in on this topic. I think folks might have heard about vehicle miles of travel as, I guess, you know, the traffic impact measuring criteria. So in our environmental document, one of the things that we mentioned is that with the project and with tolling, one thing we would be doing is to continue to monitor what the VMT or the traffic count might be. And one of the tools that we have in the tolling space is to implement something like congestion pricing, such as higher tolls during the peak, less tolls during off-peak, for example. So that tool is available and is what we've included in both the EIR as well as in our tolling application for CTC when we sought for authority. But I guess the actual development of the actual toll rates and so forth, that will happen a little later in the kind of the MTC BAFA, the Bay Area Infrastructure and Financing Authority. The BAFA is the toll authority for this corridor. So the actual toll rates and the details will be developed and approved through that committee as part of MTC.
Thank you very much for that. So it sounds like it is under consideration as one of the tools in the toolkit. Great. With that, I would ask if any of my colleagues have any other comments or questions. Director Kelly?
Sorry, just one. I just would like to underscore that I think as we continue to make these roadway improvements and we're really looking at the traffic and transportation component, we want to make sure that all modes, including transit and bike and ped, which I know we've seen other presentations of, but that we're really thinking long-term about ensuring that train and bike and ped get the same amount of emphasis as this project develops over the long run, because we're going to need all modes to move people in the ways they want to travel. And with that, I'm happy to introduce okay. I'd like to move that we authorize the executive director to negotiate the amendment number 2 and I move to appoint Supervisor-elect Rebecca Hermosillo to replace Supervisor Gorin on the policy committee.
I'll second that.
Wonderful. And last comments by Vice Chair Bagby.
Oh, just a quick comment. Yeah, I just want to echo some of Director Kelly's comments and say just thank you so much for making a presentation on this very dense and complicated issue. We appreciate how important this corridor is for our trade region, everything in our stores, so many of our services that get here via Highway 37, and that is not lost on us. And so we appreciate yours and the committee's work on this. I will reiterate, I actually did hear your mention of SMART in the presentation, and I really did appreciate that. And I'll just also call out that SMART to Solano is on the state rail plan list of priorities, and it is something that is on the radar of the Smart Board, and I know SCTA and staff is working very closely. And I would reiterate that that is also an important potential tie for our economies, our job centers, our housing sheds, and looking forward to a solution where we can have multimodal connections for this entire trade region, because we all work together and use our services, and it's important that we're continue to be tied closely with Solano County and destinations beyond that. So thanks, David, for managing. This is a tough one, but it's so important for all of our constituents, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And with that, we can go ahead and take a voice vote on the motion and the second. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Any abstentions or any opposed? Seeing none, that does carry unanimously. And I completely echo my colleagues' remarks. Thank you so much for the thorough presentation. And I do appreciate that we have had past presentations really more highlighting transit and multimodal transportation as well. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the ongoing conversation in the years to come. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to another fun subject for which I believe you are also in the hot seat on, which is the 101 project update and HOV hours of operation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be delivering this item by myself. We do have Connie Vermeer, who is our project manager on the MSN corridor for both SCTA and TAM, available online if there are any questions. So just to give you an update on where we're at. So we have the presentation going. All right. So the Marin Sonoma Narrows, or MSN, is a very long corridor. And to give you a summary of this presentation, we want to give an update on the corridor, the remaining projects, and then the work that's been going on the last few months, looking at the hours of the carpool lane, or high occupancy vehicle, or HOV hour lane in Marin and Sonoma County. So this is the MSN corridor is a 17-mile corridor from State Route 37 to Corona Road in Petaluma. It includes 13 different sub-projects, and will complete the 52 miles of HOV lanes from Richardson Bay in Marin County to Windsor. Construction began back in 2011, and construction of the system is expected to be complete next summer. You can see on the map here, there's the 17 different projects and kind of the rainbow of colors. All of the winding work in Sonoma County is complete, and the last remaining segment is the segment B7 between roughly the county line and the city of Novato. The B7 project, the construction that's occurring right now, the completion of stage 3 for the northbound widening with all the retaining walls that have been seen going up the last few months. That traffic shift is anticipated to happen this winter. And so traffic will shift back to having the southbound lanes, northbound lanes in the correct position, so the contractor can start working on the median barrier, the final paving, striping, and the signage as part of stage 4. Weather dependent, we're looking at opening the traffic in summer of 2025. The remaining projects in the corridor include the B6 project, or the San Antonio Road Bridge replacement at the county line. This is a local bridge replacement project, but it's included as part of the corridor as part of the mitigation measures of the original environmental impact report for the corridor, which converted the highway from an expressway with limited access points and bicycles were allowed on the shoulder to a full freeway standard. And so this bridge is required to be replaced to provide that bicycle access. And it's also a very old bridge that needs replacement with current standards. There's also the MSN B8 project for widening leading up to the bridge in Marin County, and we're locating some utilities, and also corridor-wide mitigation monitoring. Looking at the HOV hours in the corridor, their existing HOV hours in Marin include very uniquely only southbound only hours from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and then northbound only hours from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's not done anywhere else in the Bay Area, and really not done much else in the state. In Sonoma, we have 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. in both directions, and then in the afternoon, we have 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. So looking at the other HOV hours in the Bay Area, you have the express lane networks shown up there in green from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. all day. You have the state-owned bridges kind of in the middle there, and then at the very bottom, you have the Marin 101 hours, which are incredibly short, followed by the Sonoma 101 hours, which are a little bit above them, which are a little bit longer. We've been partnering with our partners in Marin County, with the Transportation Authority Marin, along with MTC, Caltrans, the Highway Patrol, the Golden Gate Bridge District, and Marin Transit to look at the hours in the quarter and how they can promote mode shift. I should note that the HV hours really are how we can manage the system as it is. We don't have the money and we're not going to widen the highway anymore. We have to manage the system we have where we can. And that's through setting HOV hours. And setting those hours really help us to promote transit and carpooling, ride sharing, and getting people during those commute hours to shift to other modes of transportation rather than just driving single occupancy vehicles. I should note that there are some long-term concepts that MTC is looking at implementing tolling in the corridor, though that's very far away for 101, and we don't anticipate that happening for a number of years. In the original environmental document for Marin Sonoma Narrows, it had a statement that the HOV lanes would be restricted to vehicles carrying 2 more people during specific hours, usually during the peak commute periods. Outside of these specified hours, the HOV lanes would be available to all vehicles, regardless of the amount of passengers. And then looking at another section of that EIR, HOV lanes in the 101 corridor of Marin Sonoma counties would operate in both the AM and PM PI hours for both southbound and northbound directions. And then another Caltrans directive 43-R1, managed lanes, including HOV lanes, are used to promote carpooling and transit usage, improve travel time and reliability, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and maximize the efficiency of our freeway by increasing person and vehicle throughput while reducing congestion and delay. That's why we're looking at these hours and really trying to sync up Marin County with Sonoma County. 2 different scenarios we've been looking at for just the weekday hours. The first scenario would look at kind of consistency with the state-owned toll bridges, which does not include the Golden Gate Bridge. So this would be looking at changing the hours to 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. in each direction and 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. in each direction. That has minimal amount of increased congestion from our preliminary analysis, but it does have significant changes in Marin County. Another scenario we looked at is that express lane scenario of 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. all day, which would have much greater impacts on the traveling public. Possible third scenario will be looking at potential, could you use something in between, maybe do 6 p.m. to 9, or 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., or do you do 3 to 6:30? Something that we'll be meeting actually tomorrow with our executives to discuss further as we meet with our consultant team from Fair and Peers. Here's a step on the decision-making process we've been looking at the last few months. Back in May, Caltrans collected traffic counts on the corridor, and we've been working with TAM's consultant, Fair and Peers, to do analysis in the corridor. They've been refining those results, and we're starting to look at them now. Our executives are going to be meeting to discuss this further tomorrow, and then the agency is going to be reviewing the results over the winter. At some point, there will be a recommendation made to the Managed Lane Committee, which is a committee composed of MTC, Caltrans, and Highway Patrol. They are the committee that has the authority to set the hours in the corridor, and SCTA and TAM really can only make our recommendations and viewpoints known to that committee, but we are not a deciding body on the hours. We will have results come back to the TAM and SCTA board of that Managed Lane Committee back hopefully in February and March of next year. And then that will be off to the races at that point, where we're going to have to design and implement and construct a lot of new signs, probably putting stickers on the existing signs in Sonoma County. And then because the signs in Marin County are only one direction, we have to replace all of those sign panels. So there's just not enough room for a new sticker on there. And then hopefully by summer next year, we'll have the open the HOV lanes to traffic, and we'll have synchronized hours between both counties. As part of that, we're working on public outreach and public engagement with the PIOs from TAM, SCTA, MTC, and Caltrans all working together to develop a messaging campaign. Once the hours are set, there'll be a big PR push, including changeable message signs, and really trying to get a message out there to the public that the hours are going to be changing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. Bringing it back to the board for any questions, Director Reynosa.
I seem to remember, but I don't remember what, thank you for the presentation, where it was discussed, but was it discussed eliminating the HOV lanes? Like what would that do, what would that create? Because we talk about traffic, people sitting in traffic. I'm just wondering if that is being discussed or part of this report.
There has not been any discussion to eliminate the HOV lanes. The original lanes were environmentally cleared and built based on the Bay Area's air quality standards. And if we remove the HOE restriction, we would not meet air quality standards. And MTC is actually looking at potentially changing HOE lanes and general purpose lanes throughout the Bay Area to tolled lanes. But that's not part of this study at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Corsi?
I appreciate you're doing the analysis and taking a close look at this. But I think in the end, that consistency is probably the most important thing. As someone who previously commuted between Sonoma and Marin counties, I never understood the different hours and the one-way only HOV lanes in Marin County. I know that Marin is a very special place, but I think the traffic in Marin is very much like the traffic every place else. It sucks. And this is a good way to encourage people to approach it differently. But consistency, I think, is really important here.
Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Yeah, I could never figure that out either, and why we just make it extraordinarily confusing for people, quite frankly. You cross the border and suddenly things are different anyway. With that, I would ask if any members of the public in person wish to speak on this item. Seeing none, Drew, do we have anyone online?
We do have a member of the public online. Whoops. Lost my button, my apologies. All right, we have Rick Lutman. Rick, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been living in Sonoma County since 1970, so I've done a lot of driving on Highway 101. And despite the accolades that that have been given in the last few minutes to consistency, I'd like to speak against the idea that one size fits all. All the way from Richardson Bay to Windsor. There's a lot of difference. There's a difference in afternoon and evening. There's much more congestion around the two major cities, San Rafael and Santa Rosa. I often wonder when I'm driving in Sonoma County why there is a restriction in the afternoon on the southbound lanes. There's just not very much traffic. So I guess I put myself in the camp of one size doesn't really fit all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rick. Chair Hopkins, I don't see any further members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
Thank you. I will bring it back to the board. And Rick, I appreciate your comment, but I will say that I am regularly stuck in southbound traffic in Sonoma County in the afternoons and during commute hours. So maybe it depends on precisely which segment, but I think that if we got to a point where we have different segments with different sort of times, it would never really work, and it would be pretty disruptive of traffic patterns. So I do appreciate this effort. I'm guessing it will likely be a bit more contentious in Marin than it will be up here. And so wish my colleagues luck down in their neck of the woods. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? With that, that is just a reportable item. So thank you very much for the report. And that will take us to our reports and announcements. So I will hand it over to our Executive Director, James Cameron, to kick this off.
Great. So report out of the executive committee. So the executive director's employee performance evaluation was conducted during closed session. No action was taken, nothing to report. On the December board agenda review, we discussed board items at today's meeting. There was a report out on the SCTA RCPA strategic vision and organizational alignment. I want to bring to the director's attention that item will be coming to the full board in in February, because our January meeting is proposed to be canceled. And we will be discussing a renaming of our organization of Sonoma Climate and Transportation to simplify the name of our organization, although we will still continue to do business all the time as SCTA or RCPA. So more on that, more discussion under board consideration for February. With that, I will pass it back to the chair. That concludes my executive committee report.
Thank you very much. And again, just to emphasize, this will be kind of more of a rebranding than a formal renaming process in terms of there's no alteration to the state legislation that created us, but really just try to make something that brings the two elements of the agencies together. And because we really truly are one body, and it's really kind of a mouthful to explain to constituents every time, SCTA and RCPA. And so more on that to come. With that, do we have any reports from our regional agencies? Gerard, you want to kick it off?
Not
Anything?
much going on with the bridge,
District?
except we did hire a new auditor controller. Our long-term one, Joe Wire, very talented gentleman, is retiring, and Jennifer Minucci will be taking his place, first woman of color to do that in Golden Gate Bridge's history. So we're very excited about that. And traffic remains what traffic is along the 101 corridor. We've been discussing it all day, and everything's pretty much status quo.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any report outs from boards and commissions? Just want to mention that on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, we have been discussing the implementation of our zero NOx appliance rules. The kind of first round of this will be applying to residential hot water heaters. And so if you have, folks have any questions, we have a working group. We are really keenly focused on equity and ensuring that we're not creating a cost burden on those who are least able to afford to pay. There are currently incentives for the heat pump hot water heaters. And so that's really kind of one of the technologies that is rising and is the more efficient than the standard electric water heater. So anyways, more to come. That's kind of the first round. And then in the future, it will be more of the, commercial water heaters and then into space heaters as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to, we've got the advisory committee agendas, which are noted in our board packet. And then I think that Ross is up with marketing communications.
Good afternoon, directors. So a brief report out on communications and engagement highlights over the past month. We recently conducted a comprehensive transportation plan focus group at SRJC. That was definitely successful. We partnered with them on November 15th. We had about 35 students and faculty attend the session, and we presented on the CTP as well as the Sonoma County Travel Behavior Study. Got some really good feedback, both verbally and using worksheets in small groups. And the comments received will be combined with everything else we're getting on the CTP to inform the current update. Safe Streets for All was discussed in the last meeting, but a press release did go out. Also on November 15th, announcing that Department of Transportation $172 million grant from that we got a piece of. So that was distributed to local media outlets, and a link is currently in the agenda packet if you'd like to look at that. And then lastly, this was just addressed by David's presentation, but SCTA communication staff are coordinating with TAM, Caltrans, and MTC to develop that messaging on the HOV lane update. So we're going to be kind of waiting to see what gets finalized, but already working on some messaging for the public as the actual hours are solidified. So please let me know if you have questions about these or any other communications or engagement items.
Thank you so much. Any questions before we move on to Tanya? Seeing none, thank you so much, Ross.
Thank you.
And we will invite Tanya up.
Good afternoon, directors. I will give you a brief update on climate change activities that have taken place over the last month. Staff is continuing to work on our equitable building electrification action plan and had a meeting with our staff advisory group to continue getting input on the proposed report and the various aspects of that are important to your jurisdictions. We also presented an update on that to our members and partners meeting, which is staff from all of the jurisdictions. And that's a meeting that we host every other month. Staff is also involved at a regional level in a planning effort that's being led by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District to develop a Bay Area Regional Climate Action Plan. And it's important for our CPA to be involved in this effort as a representative of Sonoma County to make sure that the plan includes our needs here in Sonoma County, and also to be tuned in and connected to any funding opportunities that might come out of this planning process. So we'll continue to be involved in that effort. Another area that we're exploring to bring additional resources to Sonoma County for our electric vehicle efforts is working with the Department of Energy's Clean Cities and Communities Coalition. This is a nationwide program that supports regions in forming their own electric vehicle coalitions to facilitate information sharing, funding, et cetera. And it turns out that there are 2 of these coalitions already in the Bay Area, one in the East Bay and actually one in Sacramento. So we've had a couple of meetings now with DOE staff to learn more about these coalitions and to explore the feasibility of either joining up with an existing coalition or forming our own. And where we're standing right now is that it probably makes more sense to partner up with an existing coalition so that we could tie into the larger Bay Area efforts around electric vehicle charging, procurement, et cetera, and bring those resources to Sonoma County. We already coordinate local EV actions through our local government EV partnership, and this could be a great way to bring additional resources to that effort. So we're planning a follow-up meeting in early 2025 with representatives from the DOE and likely the East Bay Clean Cities Coalition to explore this further. In terms of our Bay Area Regional Energy Network focus, we are continuing outreach for the existing programs. And a good example of that is that there's a mail campaign being planned to multifamily properties with 5 to 25 units to promote in-person workshops to help those units learn about the rebates and other programs that are available to upgrade those multifamily properties. We're also getting ready and really excited to see some of the new programs starting to roll out in 2025. There are numerous public programs, which you'll hear more about probably in February or March, that will support our local jurisdictions in planning and implementing and finding funding for municipal building upgrades. And we're also working on building an interest list for the redesigned single-family program. Lastly, in our codes and standards program, we're looking ahead to the 2025 energy code changes and how we can bring that information here to Sonoma County. And then lastly, on the climate funding side, did want to mention that we're continuing to work on organizing a workshop for the Inflation Reduction Act's elective pay program. This will be a virtual workshop that we actually are working with our partners in BayREN to offer this Bay Area wide. And elective pay is the IRA program that allows local jurisdictions to access tax credits for some of your EV projects, building upgrade projects. And we think it's a great program that is not well known and utilized yet in Sonoma County. We're also paying close attention to any impacts to this program with the new administration. So far, we're hearing that for projects put into operation in 2024, the tax credits will still be available. Not as sure about projects that go into effect in 2025, but that's an area that we're definitely tracking. And we're in contact with a number of organizations that are really clued into what might be happening in these different programs. So lastly, the workshop is tentatively planned for January 29th. You'll hear more about that as it gets finalized, and we're just working to confirm the speakers for that workshop. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for all the updates. Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, thank you so much, Tanya. Appreciate it. Up next, I think we have Chris with planning.
Good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and directors. Happy to give a quick update on our planning activities for the month. So starting out with our vehicle miles traveled, mitigation banking and exchange program. So that's moving along. We've been meeting with a project TAC made up of your staff and other representatives around the county to develop and refine a list of potential VMT reducing projects, review VMT project evaluation criteria, look at potential legal issues and concerns, and then talk about a pilot program that we're looking at running through sometime next year. So making some good progress on that effort and looking forward to having something for you to look at sometime next year. So appreciate your staff's participation in that as well. So moving on to the countywide active transportation plans, the public comment period is closed on the draft countywide and city ATPs. And so the consulting team has summarized all the comments and is working with SCTA and the cities to figure out how to incorporate all those comments into the final plans. So the county, unincorporated county's draft ATP is out for public review through February 24th and will be presented at the Sonoma County Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee on December 18th. So happy to have that out as well. So the final plans are scheduled for council adoption in January and February, and the countywide ATP will be coming back to you in February for final adoption. So moving on to our community-based transportation plans for South Santa Rosa and Central Rohnert Park. So those are moving along as well. So we've been working with your staff from Rohnert Park and Santa Rosa to develop and review the existing conditions and related plans analysis and finalize the engagement plan and approach. So those are all coming together. And we're also developing community-led resource committees made up of community members in each of those areas to help guide the effort and make sure we're reaching the right communities in each of those areas. So those are coming together and we'll meet for the first time in December. So we're looking forward to engagement actually kicking off sometime next year. So we've been doing a lot of preparatory work and we'll actually be out in the community pretty soon for those efforts. So moving on to the comprehensive transportation plan, we heard our progress report from Adam today. Ross mentioned some of our engagement activities. We're also working with your public works, transit, and planning staff to update our CTP project list. We have a very long list of projects in the CTP, so we're updating that information. And we have an open application for new project submissions due this Friday. So looking forward to getting some new ideas in the mix there as well. And so we'll collect all that information, update the big list, and bring something back to you next February or March to take a look at. So moving on to the transit-oriented communities policy, there's been a little movement there. The final policy guidance was updated and posted to the MTC website in September. MTC and ABAG are providing some technical assistance grants as well to help with planning and implementation for that. So applications for those were due in November. So I know a number of your jurisdictions did apply for that technical assistance. So they're working through the contracting and all of that right now, and those funds will be available March, April of next year. So happy for the support. I see the support from MDC on that. So moving on to Plan Bay Area. So first, I'd like to share some good news on equity priority communities. So we had some concerns about EPCs or equity priority communities dropping off the maps because of new data MTC was using. So we did send a letter and a number of our colleagues from other counties did as well. So MDC did take that under consideration and are considering the old map and the new map as our EPCs going forward. So that means the Russian River EPC is sticking around, as well as a number of City of Santa Rosa and Rohnert Park EPCs that dropped off the map. So we're glad to see that happen. That was some good news out of the region. So moving on to the Plan Bay Area project list. So there is a draft project list out, released in the last couple of weeks. So you have heard that Smart to Healdsburg is in the draft list, along with our bus transit improvement project, along with the Arada Lange interchange and a number of other projects that are included in programmatic categories or buckets, including the Cotati Highway 116 corridor improvement project and the Caulfield Bridge project as well. So those are a little bit harder to pull out of the list since they're in these bigger categories, but they are in there. If you have any questions, please let us know and we can help let you know kind of where they fit in. Smart to Cloverdale is not on the draft list. So we are working with MTC staff, Smart staff, and MTC commissioners to work on having that included. So we're pushing on that. So moving on to bike share, some more good news. 164 bikes are out in service. And so the remaining about 130 will be out soon with expanded hubs at the Smart stations and more service in Novato and Santa Rosa. So a little bit of a few statistics. In the last 6 weeks since mid-October, there were over 500 unique users. So a lot of people using those bikes and 1,300 app downloads. So hopefully people are curious and will actually turn those application downloads into actual use of the rideshare system. So a lot of good news, some frustration that we're working with, but we're working through that. So happy to answer any questions.
Great update. Thank you so much. Any questions? Yeah, Director Harvey.
Are there any specific areas that you're seeing the bike shares more active or not? I drive by them, but they're always there, it seems. So I don't know whether that's because someone's, managing them very well and putting them back, or do you have any data at all?
We do. I can't recall. Dana may off the top of her head. Top station.
Yeah, I have a few things I could say off the top of my head. I do actually know that the hub by the Olivers and Cotati is one of the highest used ones, interestingly. But in general, Petaluma and San Rafael have seen the highest usage so far. So we've had a lot of rain and
Yeah.
dark evenings, so I'm excited to see what happens in the spring with usage. Great. Any other questions or comments on this one?
No.
Seeing none, thanks for such an informative update. And I think we've got Shauna up next with projects and programming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, directors. I have a few updates for you. Real quick, Hearn Avenue interchange is continuing to do pile driving to put in those bridge piles. So that is fairly loud, but it is, we're working with the city and Caltrans to make sure that we get the information out to travelers and to the residents. On Highway 121 at 8th Street East, we did have a kickoff meeting for the project delivery team for the project approval and environmental document phase. So we're moving forward with that. So that is good news to move on to that next phase. On 116, 121, the progress continues. The roundabout, as I mentioned last month, has been striped. So that is in operation in its temporary configuration, and they're starting a little bit of construction in the center before they wrap it up for winter. But they have selected the boulders that will be put in, but they haven't brought them in yet. So that's for the center of the roundabout. Yeah, in the landscape portion. Also wanted to let you know that staff has been working with all of your staff to encourage them to apply for the PROTECT program, which is the federal program of promoting resilient operations for transformative cost-saving transportation. And those applications are due in February. And staff has also been working with FHWA on the Safe Streets for All agreement for the demonstration projects ahead of the incoming administration. So we were trying to get that secured before the new administration takes office in January. With that, I conclude my report.
Great. Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, thank you so much. And I will bring it back to any final announcements from members of the board. Director Giudice and then Vice Chair.
Okay.
Bragg.
Well, I guess now is as good a time as any. So on climate ad hoc, we talked about the potential of doing a festival, some type of an environmental festival. We talked about that. And so I'm here to announce, it's not a part of SCTA, but I want to include SCTA and RCPA in particular. June the 7th, we are going to have an environmental festival. It has a nationally touring artist that I cannot discuss yet, but it's going to be exciting. We will announce on February the 1st. And now we're going to go through the process of contacting all the various environmental groups and organizations in Sonoma County. And I really would like to see RCPA play some type of a lead role in that. And more to come, but it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be called Sonoma Wild. And there'll be presenters and keynote speakers and rock and roll concert and all types of lovely hippie things to do.
Awesome. I love it. It sounds very West County. I feel
It
like
is
we'll all
very
have
West
to get
County.
ahead, right?
And when you find out who the headliner is, you're really going to think it's West County. So that's great.
Yeah. Do you have a venue or a location yet?
Oh, it's going to be at Somo Village. I'm sorry. It's at my
Awesome.
place.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Very,
On the
very
big stage.
exciting. So exciting.
Yes.
Awesome. Vice Chair Baggy.
Yes, and oversight on the announcements. Cloud silver lining. Cloud is smart. We'll have full system closure on December 14th and 15th in anticipation of the, silver lining, opening of the Petaluma North Station. So both of those events are very clear on the SMART webpage, SonomaMarinTrain.org. And I'd really invite, everyone here and in the audience, and obviously staff probably already knows about this, the grand opening of the Petaluma North Station will be Friday, January 10th at noon. And I like to think I had something to do with this, but I'm sure that the staff actually did it. There are train times. So if you're coming from the north or the south, they tell you which train that you can take to go to the grand opening of a train station. Imagine that, not just driving directions. And this is, particularly exciting. And of course, it's at 320 Corona Road in Petaluma. So hopefully Petaluma Council will be well represented there. But it is so exciting. And one thing I don't know the answer to, and I'm going to put Dana on the spot if I can. If we know if Redwood Bike Share is actually going to be active at Petaluma North for the grand opening. If it isn't, we're forgiven, but if it is, you will be responsible for figuring out your return train time after you've taken your e-bike to Lagunitas, or what's the other one on McDowell, the Hen House. So you'll be responsible for figuring out your return time and how to return that bike if they're available that day. Otherwise, of course, you can bring your bike on the train and kind of explore that area in North Petaluma. One of the things I'm really excited about is the access that ultimately will be provided for Santa Rosa Junior College students who find themselves commuting between the two campuses. I think it's going to be, there's an incredible amount of pent-up demand that we kind of know anecdotally already. And the combination of the train and the bike share, I think is going to be a wonderful resource for our local students. So I don't know, Dana, if you can answer that question, that would be great.
Yeah, so I can't promise anything, but I know we are working on it. We actually talked about that bike share hub at the new station today. So it was not included in the original permit for SMART. So we need to go through some processing. So we'll hope so.
Thank you so much. But that's thanks so much for working on it, because it really kind of explains all of the things that we do here and bringing all of those resources together. And this is one of the things that will improve the quality of people's lives when it's ready to go on day one. So thank you, Dana, for everything that you've done on bike share. And I want to thank I'm going to get cheery here. Sorry. I want to thank all my colleagues here, because at the end of the day, it's about making people's lives better. And I thank you for thanks for the Kleenex. Thanks for the dedication of my board members and SCTA staff. You're really a special group of people, and it's been an honor serving with you.
It's been an honor serving with you, Vice Chair Bagby, and we are all grateful for your service. And you have been a champion for countywide issues, and I know, but thank you for everything that you do. And it's a beautiful shawl, by the way. So with that, Director Corsi.
Now I'm really going to make Melanie cry, because I want to know if I take the train to the ceremony for the opening of the Petaluma station, will the train stop there before the opening is actually official?
It is the timings that the train numbers are on the website, but they are subject to change because that's part of the testing that's going to be happening on the December 14th and 15th. So the final schedule
So it'll already be open.
It'll already be open, be ready to go.
Okay,
So
I just wanted to make sure.
I look forward to seeing you on the train, because I'll be grabbing it from airport station. So hopefully I'll see you hop on.
It would be hilarious if you were on the train and the train just kept going to the station. I think that's what he was getting at. There it goes. I'll just jump and roll.
As always, Director Corsi, a pointed and good question.
Yes. One brief announcement. I feel like there is a new tree lighting and craft fair in West County pretty much every night of the week. But coming up this upcoming weekend, we do have the Occidental Crafts Fair, which is kind of the big deal in Occidental. And also there is Christmas in the Redwoods, which is you can go drive. You have to sign up on the website, and then you get to drive through the redwoods of Alliance Redwoods that are all completely lit up. and then there is Santa, and I hear the Grinch at the Union Hotel with cookies afterwards, which is pretty exciting. So you are all welcome. And with that, I want to wish everyone merry, happy, joyful holidays, and we are adjourned with a little dance from the reindeer.